I got into this because, I love movies. But now I have this fear that my job is to ruin them.
You'll make a great studio head.
Hi, IndieWire. I'm Evan Goldberg.
And I'm Seth Rogen. We are at the IndieWire offices in Los Angeles, and we are about to record an episode of the Filmmaker's Toolkit to talk about our new show, The Studio, coming to Apple TV+.
I guess I wanted to start by asking you guys about the relationship of Robert Altman's the player to the show, because obviously the Bryan Cranston character is named Griffin Mill, reference to the player.
Yeah.
Was that movie something that was like important to you guys as a reference point, or is that just kind of a casual tip of the hat, or how do you see the relationship of the player to this thing?
It's a movie we love, but I wouldn't say it's a movie we grew up idolizing.
No, there's just not a lot of great things made about making movies.
Yes, and that is one of them. Yes,
For
and
us,
Robert Altman we love. I think there's a Long Goodbye reference in the movie or in the show and stuff like that. So Robert Altman overall is a director that we do really love, and his work is.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of reasons why we shot the show in these lengthy shots and one-esque and literal one-ers at time, and I think that is from the player largely. The opening of that really inspired us.
Yes, and even though our look is very different from that, what I actually think it does, besides hopefully sort of the story, is I think with the player, and something we talked about is if you're making something about movie making and about Hollywood, to do something incredibly technically difficult kind of asserts your position in some way as someone who has any right to be speaking about any of this stuff. And I actually think the player does that. I remember watching the player and thinking that. He's doing one of the hardest things you can do in something that is iconic for movies total. And he's now going to go kind of make fun of movies for the next 2 hours, but he's clearly doing it from the position of someone who understands every intricacy and challenge of filmmaking,
Yeah, and I imagine just like our show, if you know filmmaking and you watch the opening of the player, you think, wow, this is an astounding feat. And if you don't know filmmaking, you just think, oh, cool.
Funny scenes.
Funny scene.
Look, it's Buck Henry.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, the relationship, the player has two movies in filmmaking, the sort of love-hate relationship it has, and I feel like your show to a certain degree has that. It's there's certain, it's clearly a show made by guys who love movies but maybe don't love some of the things about where the movie business is going, or maybe there's a certain nostalgia it feels for an earlier era, and is that stuff, how much did you guys talk about that, and how much of it is just kind of ingrained in your DNA and it just kind of comes out naturally?
I would say it's mostly ingrained in the DNA of us, but we
do talk about it.
We do talk about it a lot as well, and we're mostly just loving it. We are not bummed out. We're also very fortunate.
Yeah, the show is written by essentially very successful people, and so we're not people, who have a huge amount of resentment towards the industry, and we're people who get to live our dreams because of this industry, and have very happy lives, and so that isn't lost on us, but also it's very stressful and frustrating, and we are constantly encountering people that you want to grab and shake and be like, why the fuck are you doing this, but at the same time you grow to understand why they're doing it, because you get to know these people and you understand the true conflict at play, I think it's a conflicted relationship we have, but mostly we love movies,
Yeah, and we don't feel like we're in some gloomy era. Every 10 years it's a completely different ball game. Everything keeps changing, and you have to be able to change with it, and there's some things that are a lot harder now than they were then, but there's some things that are a lot easier. It's just a never-ending it's a very young industry in the grand scheme of industry.
Yeah, I actually always think of Network when Robert Duvall's explaining television is a volatile industry, and they're we don't want volatile industries, but that is Hollywood is a volatile industry, and I think we just kind of long ago subscribe to that idea and try not to get too frustrated with the turning tides of it.
Yeah, when the IP wave, I'll call it, swept over Hollywood.
We made Ninja Turtles.
Yeah. We were cool. What IP can we make?
And we made it the exact way we wanted, and we made the exact movie we want to make. And I actually think it's one of the best movies we've ever made. And so to us, there's a version of that where you can be very frustrated, and there's a version of it where you can sort of make make the game be played to your advantage creatively, you know?
All that being said, we still are in rooms screaming at each other and
All
other
the time,
people all
banging
the
our
time.
head against the wall,
and
incredibly
it's
frustrated.
Lots of frustration.
And there are some people in Hollywood who genuinely don't give a shit about movies and who truly only care about the bottom line.
And the rest of us know who they are,
Yeah,
talk about them all the
exactly.
time, and try to steer clear of them.
But mostly, people love movies, and I think that's also like a big misconception about people in Hollywood is that like they only care about money and not movies, and you know that is not true from our experience. They might make decisions that make you think that, but they at least feel bad about it.
Well, I'm curious, Evan. You said that some things are harder now and some things are easier. Like, I'm just curious, what do you see as being harder than when you guys started, and what's easier?
I mean, no doubt about it. To get a film into theaters, especially the types of films that we mostly have made, like R-rated, lower budget films, is way harder.
Yeah,
way harder. And there's this whole like superhero kind of craze and like being attached to big IP. That's a completely different scenario. TV's turned into this like unbelievable universe of possibilities where you can make things at budgets and with drama and comedy blended in a way that previously was unattainable. And so like TV has given us tons of opportunities that movie no longer seems to have in the same abundance. But also Ninja Turtles, like we can still make big movies and we can make different movies. We just have to pivot and be flexible.
Yeah.
Going back to that idea of the long takes, I'm curious because it is such a sort of logistically difficult feat to shoot a show where every scene is essentially no coverage and just all done in these extended takes. I'm wondering if you guys ever considered, like, you could have just done the Wonder episode and that would have been your big show-offy thing. I mean, how early on did you commit to this idea? No, we're doing every scene of the show in these elaborately choreographed long takes. And what were the pros and cons of doing it that way?
Pretty early.
Yeah, very, very early. Well,
the Wonder was one of the first ideas we thought of, and then I remember there was discussion of like, this will be the best episode, so we should sort of just do this for it. Like, I feel like we were like, and it will work the best. We were like, this is actually going to capture the kind of panic and the mania and the compressed nature of the kind of timelines and the stories which a lot of the episodes have, and that was like, I remember one of the early conversations of like, oh, we're just going to do this and be like, fuck, why don't we do this for all the episodes? So then we were like, yeah, we should probably just do it for all the episodes.
Roll sound!
Don't say that!
Yeah, back to one!
Wait, you're leaving? We didn't get a chance to finish our...
The jet, it's yours.
Oh
Don't
my
worry.
God, yes, thank you. Feel better.
Bye, Greta!
No problem. Sorry. Heading out.
Go.
Thank you all. Sorry.
I got your coffee.
Stop.
Perfect timing, Doug. Man. Jesus Christ. Oh.
We also talked a lot about, like, in This Is the End, we wanted you to feel like you were stuck in the house with these guys, and so there was some similarities in how we filmed that to this. But with this, we want you to feel the panic and the stress and the awkwardness of the rooms that we have been in our life in Hollywood, and there's no better way to do that than, like, plunk you right in it. And if you're in it, you're not cutting to a wide shot.
No, your head's kind of on a swivel and you're trying to keep up with what's happening. And yeah, like it was also like a very literal way to see Hollywood through our lens. Is like it literally, we use one lens the whole time, which is a pretty wide lens, which kind of replicates what you take in as you're standing there watching people talk. And so, yeah, we really wanted it to be almost like a first person experience of like being in these places. And at the same time, we fudge it at times, you know. We'll start wide and go close, and we'll kind of turn an establishing shot into the scene at times. But in general, it's pretty immersive, and that's what we wanted. Yeah.
What kind of demands was this placing on your DP? Like, what kind of conversations did you have to have about that?
He is. I don't want him to hear this and get a inflated ego. He's a genius. And he's incredible at what he does, and he was just exhilarated by the challenge. He was just thrilled.
Yeah, his name's Adam Newport-Berra. He's great, and yeah, he really actually like pushed us to commit even harder to it. He was like, he was also the one who was like, one lens, one camera.
And then one time he used a different lens and he was like, I don't know why the fuck I did that.
Exactly.
I don't know what I was thinking.
Only once. And then and he was like, we shouldn't even have a second camera. He's like, we'll be tempted to use it if we have it. Like we should really paint ourselves into this corner, and I will make sure that we're able to accomplish it, basically. Technically. He's like, I can't make you guys say the lines properly. But yeah, and it was a real collaboration as far as the blocking the scenes went. And
yeah, and it also, on the same note, the collaboration, it allowed him to do things that I have never seen a DP do, like tell us how an actor should say a line, because we're so entwined with him and the camera operator Mark on like what exactly is happening that the camera move and the emotion and the line being delivered do need to sync up in a way that is very specific.
Yeah.
So it created a deeper conversation with him as our DP than we've ever had before.
But it also really helped the writing. Like, we decided it really early on while we were still writing the episodes, and we really wrote to it. So it made us be very hard on the scenes and really, we really came up in like we'll find it in the editing room kind of environment where we would just say a ton of shit and kind of rewrite it in post-production, and this made it that, we really had to be like, is this good enough? And is it too long? Is it too short?
Well, and even more specific, we had to be like, what is the shot that this scene ends on in the writing?
Yeah, exactly. And is it too long? Do we need to break it up into 2 scenes? Because this will just be too long to be sitting in one place. And it was also instructive as to whether or not the scenes themselves were functioning, because if it was too long, it was a good indicator and you'd really feel it, and so it made us, we really wrote to it. And the show only has a story. I think a lot of comedy shows, it's you're cutting between. Traditionally, you would set up Ike's storyline and set up my storyline and set up Han's storyline, and we'd be cutting between the storylines, and they'd all come together in the end. But we had a very specific idea early where we was there's one storyline for every episode. There's only an A story. You're not intercutting between things, and that, I think, even furthered that we thought it was a good idea to use one camera and do it in this immersive, kind of propulsive way, basically. Yeah.
Did you ever get a moment in the editing room where you were like, "Oh shit, I wish we would have had a camera covering some of this"? Or did it all? Did you?
It is shockingly even when it came to getting notes from Apple in the editing bay, we couldn't do as much as a normal show, but we could accommodate more than we expected. We were not as remiss as we thought we'd end up being on things we missed, because we edited it while we filmed it.
Yes.
That's why there were 16 to 22 takes all the time, because the editor was there every day, all day.
Yeah, Eric Kissack, our editor, was literally on set, kind of like live editing. He'd be like, "Oh, I would trim some time off of that line, and I probably would cut that line."
And a big part of the show was everyone felt empowered to speak up, because if they didn't, they would screw everything up for everyone later in editing.
Mm-hmm.
So he would fully get up and just be like, "This scene won't work. I need you to do a whip pan there so I can stitch it, or you're going to be screwed later." And we would, even if we disagreed sometimes, we'd be like, "He really feels passionate. We should just do this."
Yes, exactly. So there were times when, having him there would make it that we would cover our ass in a slightly different way, or just just cut the scene down as we were shooting it, basically. Yeah.
And so, how organic is the process of staging these shots? In other words, are you pretty meticulously planning out ahead of time where the camera's going to be, what's going to happen, where everybody's going to be blocked, or are you able to kind of respond to what the actors are naturally doing in the moment on the day?
It sort of depended.
Like some things, like the one we went ahead of time and walked
we
through
blocked every bit of that. The whole episode we were just telling everyone exactly where to stand at all times.
Yeah, but when we were, for example, in our main office more often, it wasn't quite as specific.
No, the ones, basically, the scenes that are just kind of a bunch of people talking in a room, those we really would work out with the actors, because those were hard for us to, impose blocking on them, and so we would spend a lot of time. You get up and go over here, and you do this, and then we'd start doing it and be like, "Oh, that doesn't because his line is over here, we got to have this whole crazy whip pan just to get this one quick line, so that doesn't work. He should be over there." So we could just rack to him in the background and not have him.
And then after those conversations, we would go back and sit with the other writers, and we would all take those thoughts and see oh, maybe these 3 lines should go, maybe we can consolidate them, maybe we should shift it a little, and then change it a bit more.
Yeah,
we
do that all in the moment, and we would take hours to rehearse the scene. Sometimes we wouldn't even shoot before lunch, which made people nervous. And then we would shoot, 12 pages of stuff in one chunk after lunch. And once we started, you just wouldn't stop. And that's what was good about it, is there isn't this kind of broken up momentum of we do your shot and then we have half an hour, and we do your shot and then there's half an hour, and then we got to go to the wide shot and there's half an hour. Once we started doing the takes, we just would go and go and go and go until we got
and then we would wait until we crested the hill and it started to feel a little
it
crappy,
would get worse eventually.
And then we'd be like, okay, probably time to stop. But it felt like finishing a sport.
Yeah.
At the end of a hockey game, everyone in the locker room being like, "Well, we did it. That was the game."
And it was cool because it was a real team effort of the whole crew. Everyone was working every shot, and anything could ruin the take. Like if the light didn't turn on when it was supposed to, if the, jacket wasn't set in the right way and it's harder to put on than it's supposed to be as we're walking out the door, and if the, the coffee machine isn't working, literally every department had to really work together in like a really cool, collaborative way, because no one wanted to be the one to have ruined this giant thing, basically.
And everyone at one point was.
Always. I did.
Everyone, the props master, me, the DP,
I
all of us
more
at some
takes
point.
than anybody, for sure, yeah.
Well, statistically, you have to.
I made more scenes than most people in the show, yeah, but it was... and then some scenes are very dictated by what's happening. So it's like, oh, we're all walking from this place to this place. So and we would just tell them, and we would tell the actors that very early on. And we were like, some of these scenes, you will be a big part of the blocking of them, and some of them we will just literally be telling you where to stand. And
then sometimes we would have actors. The best one was David Krumholtz's first day. We were filming the Golden Globes episode, and there was 400 people in the room, and we did the first take, and he messed up his line. At the end of it, he went, "You fucking maniacs." He's like, "I didn't get this until I got here. What are you doing?" He's like, "You didn't warn me this is what we were doing?" I was like, "I don't know. I thought I guess we should have had a pre-call
when
about
we
it."
would spring it on the act. Well, I realized not telling them too early was bad. Like because then they would start to panic and get in their heads about it. So like you wanted to tell them close to when we were shooting, but with enough time to learn their lines really well, if they were the type of actor who didn't learn their lines incredibly
and we
well.
also always gave them the caveat, which was very true, that the first two takes never once have ever been used. We never used, I think, a single first or second take.
Yeah, so like we were like, and we would rehearse and stuff on the day, never beforehand ever, which was hard, but yeah, we would really take our time to make the blocking was incredibly important, and we saw very early on if we rushed the blocking process, it would really catch up with us in the shooting process, and so we got much more comfortable taking a lot of time to really meticulously block the scenes, and then once we started shooting, it would really just we were like off to the races, basically.
Well, and how is that further complicated in something like the Oneer episode, where it's a Oneer, but then there's another Oneer within it? I mean, like...
Yeah, that was hard. The hardest part about that episode is that it's all set at magic hour, and that the house is all glass. And when we first got there, we didn't really have access to the house before we
went for like 3 hours a week before.
Yeah, and then we showed up in the morning to shoot the episode. So we were like able to block it, and in our heads we were like, we had 4 days to shoot the episode, and we were like, okay, like all the stuff at Video Village is in the kitchen, so maybe we can kind of shoot that at any time of day, and these are the parts we could shoot have to be shot at magic hour. But we very quickly realized that was going to add way too many stitches and way too many like blends, and we wanted to really have as few as possible. And so we realized that the actual best way to do it was, like, let's say the episode's 40 pages long, like we broke it up into 4 10-page chunks, and we would rehearse each chunk from like 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then shoot from 5 to 6:30 basically. And it really was like the episode where like we were fighting the sun, and the sun is that's actually the sun.
And
in all the shots.
There was one day where we didn't finish the day because the sun set too soon because a piece of equipment malfunctioned, and we
had
were
to catch it up the next day and
do
more the next day. Yeah, and like so it was. We thought it would be actually easier than it was, and then we got in there. We're like, oh no, this whole house is glass, and there's no way to fake it, basically. So, yeah, we would shoot. Yeah, we probably shot the whole episode over the course of like 10 hours, basically spread out over 4 days.
Something else that seemed to me to be really logistically difficult is you have these episodes that take place at enormous events, whether it's the Golden Globes or CinemaCon, and I'm assuming that, I'm assuming you guys weren't restaging the Golden Globes or CinemaCon. I mean, were you like piggybacking off of them?
No,
you restaged them.
Completely.
Okay. We completely restaged them.
We completely built them, which was really
one
hard.
of the harder things of the whole show. Restaging the
imagine.
Golden Globes was a real nightmare.
Yeah, that was hard. We were adamant that it had to be shot at the Beverly Hilton in the actual room where the Golden Globes were. And I'd say rightfully, a lot of our producers and partners at the studio were like, why? Like who will know the difference? And we were like, it just has to, we were like, we'll know. It just, you want to give, and part of me really wanted, I thought a cool part of the show is like to really give people, whether they know it or not, what the experience of it, and I just thought we kept had this idea in our heads. It'd be cool to you start in the limo and you walk through red carpet and you walk through the lobby and you walk into the ballroom and isn't it cool to just like actually show people what that's like in like a very moment to moment basis, you know? And so we got the Beverly Hilton, but we only had it for 5 days basically, and there was construction going on at the time, which was a real nightmare. And I think the normal Golden Globes loads in over the course of like 2 weeks or something. We had like 12 hours basically to set up the entire set and the stage and all that. And then, we shot the whole episode in over the course of 4 days. And it was, it was the first episode we did with a ton of background, basically. And so we had this kind of one-er system that we were getting pretty good at, but then adding like 500 people.
Yeah, just the
into every
resets.
shot.
That was the only one where we did 4 to 6 takes per sequence and just had to move on.
Yeah, the resets were insane. It took so long to get everyone back to their play, and like.
But it was crazy. The pressure made it that like no one messed up their lines.
No, everyone was really on their game. Yeah, it was shocking how well it all came together, and all the guest stars in that episode. That was also very hard to coordinate, I would say, but yeah, I'd say the fact that you couldn't tell if it was the real one or the fake one is a testament to us pulling it off.
It is. It's a real testament to like your production designer. I mean, I'm curious, like what kind of work did your production designer do to replicate that? Like, I mean, was it just purely based on watching the Globes? Did they talk to anyone who worked on the Globes? Or
Her name's Julie Berghoff, and it's a huge amount of research. And she's in the industry. She knows everyone who's done everything.
But we also asked her to sort of do her own design for it, like 'cause they do kind of redesign it. A lot of it was also like, you know, like what we could afford, what we could move into the location and the amount of time that we had. But
there was a lot of like she'd be like, I got to put hedges here, or you're gonna see this. And I can't afford that, but I'll put a big shiny sign here.
And the screens were very important and the placement of them was very important, and that was actually something that we spent a lot of time really dialing in because the show is all shot on a 21 millimeter lens. It's pretty wide, so as soon as anything's in the distance, it's very small. And normally, if I'm sitting in the audience at the Golden Globes watching someone on stage, you would just cut from a close-up to me to a close-up of the person on stage. But we don't really we can't do that. And so placing screens around that were live feeds of what was happening with close-ups of the people on them, so I could be in the foreground and you'd see the screen behind me with a close-up of the person talking. That was like a really logistically complicated but necessary thing we realized very early in order to make the episode work and to make sure that everyone, all these famous people and Zoe Kravitz, who I have the story with, aren't just like, you know, like an inch big on your screen, basically. Yeah.
Well, you know, I was just thinking of something else that Golden Globe episode, which is, you know, I was thinking of the Ted Sarandos cameo. And you've got a few actors, you've got a few people on the show like him and Matt Bellany who are not actors, who you're putting.
Are now.
Yeah. They are now, yeah.
I mean, like, how did they handle this whole crazy production method you would come up with?
I think they kind of roll even better than the professional actors because they don't understand how crazy the circumstance is.
They have no expectation, yeah. In some ways, it feels the most like when you made movies with your friends as a kid. Like, you would just kind of do it and point the camera at whoever was talking, and you didn't edit or anything like that. So I actually think...
Yeah, like, Ted was just like, I stand here, I say my line here, and then that one there, and we're like, yes.
Yeah.
Easy.
And you can just kind of play it like a scene. And I think if you aren't so in your head about it, then it actually is easier in some ways. But it's hard in that if you mess up at all, you can't just retake the line. You have to redo the whole scene, basically. But they aren't the longest scenes.
Well, now, obviously, like some of these, like Sarandos, that's a very specific cameo, even to a certain extent, Matt Bellany. But then you've got these other people, you know, again, Zoe Kravitz. I mean, it's not cameo, but like you got people playing themselves, Zoe Kravitz, Olivia Wilde, whatever. You've obviously tailored it to them, but it's also, I'm just curious, like, how you made the decisions about what kind of actors you would cast as themselves. I mean, like, and did that change? Like, did you write in people who you couldn't get or who didn't understand it and then have to kind of retool it a little bit?
The only people we didn't get, per se, were a couple scheduling issues, and there were, like, 2 people who were just fundamentally not interested in playing themselves. But in general, the target was much smaller than you would imagine for pretty much every person we cast.
Because it's like, not only are they like famous people, but they're like, the role they occupy in Hollywood was very specific for each person. And that was something we didn't want the audience to have to suspend any disbelief when it came to like, who is famous and who would a studio be excited about working with, and who would you bend over backwards to work with, and who would you be afraid that person yelled at you, and who would you want to like you, you know? And so,
but then it would also be like, but is a director, but also an actor who's directed
Exactly,
some things,
exactly.
but not too
So
many things,
that-
and hasn't won an award for directing, but could win an award for
exactly.
directing.
All that had to be taken into consideration. Parker Finn was maybe the smallest bullseye because we were like,
The
we
only-
needed,
that
we
wasn't even a
needed-
bull. That was
there
just-
there's him and no one else. We were like, we need a director who's directed a horror franchise that has like a gimmick that is replicatable in another shittier way, kind of. And literally, we were like, it's Parker Finn who does smile, and literally nobody else. We were like, Megan, maybe, I don't know, not quite the same, because we also liked that it was like he kept doing a bunch of them, and so yeah, like if Parker Finn said no, I have no idea what we would have done. But that happened a lot. There was a lot of people we were like, if they say no, we have to reimagine this whole like part of the episode and the whole episode to some degree.
And there is like
yeah.
a script we were working on for an episode that we put aside for now because we couldn't get the person who hit that bullseye. It did happen once.
It was like too specific a person, and there literally was only 2 or 3 people who could do it, and it was like a scheduling, like none of them could do it when we needed to do it. So yeah, we literally didn't shoot the episode. Yeah.
Something else I really loved about the show was the use of LA locations and just the way you present LA. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what your like philosophy was about how you wanted to present LA on screen.
I mean, we first, like right out of the gate, we just wanted to film in LA very badly. That's where we started filming. Everything's moved other places.
And we've seen how they can send you out of LA even if your thing is set in LA. So a part of, honestly, like the pitch for the show was like, it needs to be anchored in like a very iconic version of Los Angeles, not like a replicatable version of Los Angeles, but a real tangible version of Los Angeles, you know? And there's a documentary that Frida Perez, one of the creators, first told me about that we've all since watched called Los Angeles Plays Itself.
Oh, yeah.
That was actually like a real inspiration for the show and one of like the biggest visual inspirations for the show. And we love this idea of kind of honoring the movies, like John Lautner. His work is like very used in a lot of films, you know what I mean, as an architect. And so we thought, oh, maybe the homes are John Lautner homes. And that's sort of like a wink to that documentary, who has a whole section about the Garcia house and architectural homes in general, you know, and the chemosphere, you know, and so and then there was things like the Chateau Marmont and the Beverly Hilton. We just thought like it would be amazing if we were able to like capture the kind of the magic and wonder of getting access to some of these places, basically.
Yeah, and it just felt like it would like over the course of the season build up to a thing that stands out. Maybe not in any given moment is it going to like blow people's minds, but slowly they'll feel like this is real.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. And I think that like something that we always like thought was funny is like a lot of our experience in Hollywood is being in like very beautiful places, hotels, like the lobbies of these studios that were designed by brilliant architects and beautiful homes, just like screaming at each other about the stupidest shit in the entire world. And just like we're literally arguing if like the CGI dick and This Is the End is like too floppy, and like we're in like, you know, this like $40 million mansion just like screaming at each other about the dumbest stuff. And that was part of the experience we wanted to capture.
It's still happening.
Still happens all the time.
Every day.
Was the location where you actually built the interior of the studio, was that the Bradbury building? Was that like, it looks like the...
No, it's a set, but it was again like based on. There's actually a great documentary about Frank Lloyd Wright's work in Los Angeles. I think it's on KCET. It's like, and it's all about how he came to LA in like the 20s, like around when these studios were all being built, and he built all these like Mayan revival buildings basically, and they were very like monumental, but also very tomb-like, and that was always an idea that we thought was kind of cool. And it was actually, I remember we talked to Rick Carter really early on in the process because I became friendly with him, and we were like, we have this crazy idea that Frank Lloyd Wright built the offices for the buildings, and he was like, yes, like that's a great idea. And he's like, that really anchors the whole thing in like a tangible history, and it makes it feel permanent, and you'd constantly be trying to live up to this like grandeur of this space basically. And to us, we were like, is it just like, do you just expect it to be like The Office, just like people in a gray building, you know? And it was actually like a very big swing to set it in such a specific place. But I remember Rick was very encouraging of it early on.
Yeah, no, I think it was a great idea because the show really does have this sense of like people living kind of under the weight of history and wanting to live up to this history, but it's like you guys say it's always changing, so it's like how do you do that? And it's really, really fascinating.
It's funny if next season we're just in like a white office. They knocked it down.
We'll use the Severance set.
Exactly. Or this building we're currently in right now.
I also want to get to another, again, the final episodes take place in Vegas, and you've got these scenes, like these crazy scenes with Bryan Cranston, like, like drugged out of his head, running through the casino and stuff. And I'm wondering, like, when you're shooting something like that, like, how much control do you have in the casino? Like, are you getting parts of it closed off for you?
We have at least 30 feet.
Yeah, exactly.
Pure control. It was insane.
It was crazy.
It was like 5 feet to the right. There's just like 8 people watching, like trying
People
to take a picture.
Like, Walter White. Yeah, like it was. Thank God we shot those episodes last because we were pretty dialed into the process.
Yeah, it would have gone real bad if it wasn't the last one.
Because it was logistically insane, and like we couldn't plan it all. We had no access to any part of it before we got there, and we knew we needed. There's stunts, there's people falling, there's stunt people,
and usually there's like 3 to 4 famous people per shot. So like the odds of someone bothering us are pretty high the whole time.
All just on this casino floor, like
and we'd been there. We were there for 11 days, so they knew people would see us multiple times.
We were like
and know
on the
we're
tour.
there.
They're like, oh, and there's the Catherine O'Hara and Bryan Cranston over here. There's the Baccarat table. Yeah,
it turned into like a Twilight Zone episode. We never left except for one shot in 120-degree weather with Seth
there was
in
like
a car.
heat wave when we were shooting there, so we couldn't leave.
And we slept in the same hotel we filmed in.
Yeah, so like literally we'd like walk from our rooms to the elevator. The elevator doors were open, and like there's like you're on the set basically. I ate nothing but Grand Lux Cafe for 2 weeks straight. That's not helpful.
Yeah, I can't go back there for a while.
No, I would go back.
Yeah,
I would go back. But yeah, it was really fun though, and it was a lot though. It was pretty.
There was a lot of times where you're just like, we're still here.
I know, and I was just
nuts.
And you really had to like hand yourself over to the insanity of it, which I think tonally was good actually for the episodes in some ways, but for a shooting style that requires like an incredible amount of control over the timing and the environment, we had very little control over the timing or the environment in Vegas especially, and so it was crazy.
And also we had a lot of like every single spot that we shot had a restriction timing wise. Like you can shoot here for 90 minutes.
Oh yeah,
and that is.
Yes, and they would change it all the time. So, like, we'd get there thinking we had 2 hours, and they'd be like, we got to be gone in 45 minutes. We're like, okay, I guess we just got to do it fast then. Everyone act fast.
Well, it's a really terrific show. I mean, I really, honestly, I'm not just saying it because you guys are here. I think it's one of the funniest shows I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, that's so nice.
Really brilliant, really brilliantly made, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come and talk with me about it. This has been great.
Thank you so much.
So, thanks so much, guys.
That.
Thank you.